Right, guys, welcome back to part two. And in part two, we're going to be looking at creating apps and then models for apps. So we've ticked off the first part. We're now looking at what apps are. Apps are amazing. So this is one of the greatest things about writing a Django project is I can have apps for different things. For example, let's say, for example, if my website included a blog, then I can write an app for a blog. And then if I created a new project and that project also required a blog, I can actually copy and paste the blog section from one of my projects to another project, and it should work. You just have to connect the new app to the project. Or it could be that, for example, maybe I'm going to have an app for dealing with users. And whenever I create an app, if I want to copy that and add it to another project, I can do that. So let's start off by, first of all, running the line to create a new app. So you want to create a new app. I'm going to call it films. So I've copied that over. And if we go to here and right click, what you'll see is when I run this, oh my gosh, it's not worked. It's because I haven't activated my virtual environment. So we're going to, again, we'll say env/scripts/activate. And that's important, okay, because you could see here in the error, it says could not import Django. Are you sure it's installed? So in other words, Django is installed, but it's not on my whole computer. So my Windows machine that I'm running this from doesn't have Django installed, but it's installed here in my virtual environment. So if I activate my virtual environment, then it will find that Django is installed in this folder in my sandbox. Right, so let's run that again. And you'll see now that it's created another folder called films. And this is going to be where I'm going to build the app for storing films in our movie database. And everything that entails. So according to this, we have run the line to create our films app, and it's created our films folder. The next step is we want to use the settings file in our core app to connect this new app to our Django project. So if we go back, we'll go to core and settings, and where we have installed apps, I'm just going to say let's add films. That was the name of my app, and because it's a list, I want to end that with a comma, so every new app I add, it won't have a problem. So let's click on save and close the settings. Now, as you can see, as I'm modifying files, you see here in VS Code that there's an M next to this file to tell me that this has been modified. And then obviously when I'm done, I can synchronize the changes that I've made. Obviously, as I've created a new films app, these new files have also been created and they need to be synchronized to my GitHub repository. Right. So we've done that. And let me now introduce you to something else. So let's look at, for example, if we look here, this may be not the easiest to read, understand, but if I look at this, we know that the root URL to this particular website, IMDb, is imdb.com. This is what we call our root URL. Now, every particular film will have a code of its own. So it might be /film and then / whatever numerical or, whatever code ID that film has. So this, for example, if we look back at any film, let's pick out, for example, Oppenheimer. You can see here that it says IMDb /title, and then TT is the code for their films and the code that goes behind it. Okay, the rest we don't have to worry about for now, whatever. But you can see that these are what we call URL patterns. So if we go back to our project here, and if we go to in our core folder, you'll see that there's a urls.py file. If we open that up, you'll see that there's one pattern. That basically means that after the root URL, there's only one other pattern that will work, and we'll test that now actually. So let's run iPhone manage.py and let's say run server. If we run the server, it tells us that at this local URL, if I click on control and click, it will open it up in Edge here. You can see that our project is running, and this is just a base template. So this is like a Django has as a default home URL. And you can see that if I was to type anything in, so for example, if I type films, it will tell me that it's not working, and it will tell me that the only URL pattern that it understands other than the home, the root URL, is admin. So if I was to type that in, it's got this login page for the administrator. We haven't created an admin user yet, so we'll come back to that later. But okay, so there's my root URL. And what we now want to do is we also want to create in the films directory, we want to create another URLs file. So let's do that here. We'll say file urls.py. And now that we've done that, we want to create some URL patterns here to do with the film. So we keep all our URLs separate. Our core URLs will be separate from the app for the URLs for our film app. And like I said, that's useful if I'm going to create lots of different apps. So whether it's one for user, one for films, one for anything else, or maybe for example, my blog pages, each URL pattern will be included in its own app directory. So in the URLs file here, it gives me a tip here actually. It says, first of all, I'm going to have to import the include function from, it says from Django URLs import include. So let's copy that. To be fair, it's already there. I've already got from Django.urls. I'm just going to add include here. So that now adds the include function. So it means that I can now run path, and I'm going to say with the root. So if I do that and add nothing else to it, it basically means that my films, I could do exactly like IMDb. I could write title in there as well. We'll come back to that. So I want to run include, and then in quotes, I'm going to say include films. That was the name of my app dot URLs. So now it will include the URLs, the URL patterns from the films app, which we have over here. So we'll add a space on the end. In fact, should I do it just like, no, I'm going to leave it like that for now. Okay. So I'm going to click on save. And if I go back to this new one that we just created, in fact, what I'll do is I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to leave out the admin line because I only need the admin to load the admin page from the core. Let's paste that in. I can delete that admin line, don't need that. And I'm going to delete this one as well. In fact, I'll just leave it like this for now. Like that. Okay, that won't make sense, but we'll make more sense of that later. So I've included path. I do have to include something here, but we'll make more sense of that in just a moment. So I'll delete this line as well. So now what that basically means is whenever core is loaded, it will also include any URL patterns from the films folder. Okay. Let's go back to here. So we've created our app, and it says the next step, which we're going to look at, is creating a model for our films and the ability to vote for films. To do that, obviously we need to store all of our films in a database. And what the models are, or the models are, for example, how we want to create those tables, and with what information, what field names, what title heads in the database table for each film. So I've got a list here, and I've said I'm going to include title, release date, certification in terms, whether it's an 18 or a PG, duration, so length of film, genre, whether it's action, comedy, romance, and some other data such as, for example, what director and what stars there are in the film, a blurb, and a poster. Now, the reason why I've done this, you can do it differently. The reason why I've done this is because later on in the project, I'm going to include a text file, which will enable us to import a bunch of films to begin with so that we don't have to sit there and type them all out one by one. And so this is going to be our first table. So we run this class to do that. And our second table is going to be a rating table. So in our database, we're going to have a table for films, and then we'll have a table that connects the user with the film. So whenever someone votes for a film, it's going to refer to which film was voted for by which user, and then what rating they gave the film. So actually, to make this easy, I'm just going to copy all of its stuff. In fact, I'll copy this line as well. I'll explain why. So if I go back to my project and I say in models, I'm just going to paste it here. Right. So this first thing I've copied in here, this line 2, it loads the settings file from the core, which basically just tells Django where our settings are in this app. So it tells this app where our settings belong. And the reason why we're using that is in our ratings, in our ratings table, in our model there, we include the user. And this basically just tells our model here where our user settings are. So in other words, where it's going to find the table for our user, because we haven't created a table for user here. We could do that. I'm not doing that for this particular tutorial. So let's save that as well. So now that that's saved, we are going to synchronize our table with our database. So as we created our project, you can see here that when we ran it, it also created a database file, SQLite. So what I now want to do is I want to tell you what this is. If I say run, so if we say Python manage.py and we say make migrations, what this does is in our films directory, you'll see that there's a folder for migrations. And at the moment, it's really got nothing in it. It's got this init file, this initialization, but it's got nothing else. So what this will do is, this will tell, because like I said before, Django uses Python to create this backend server for us. And now that I've run that, what it's done here is just created this initial migrations file. And what this basically is, in a very simple manner, is it uses Python code to write the SQL for us. So our databases are written in SQL language or SQL. And this basically uses Python to write the SQL code for us to convert that from Python into SQL code. And then what we do is we're going to run migrate. So Python manage.py migrate, which then takes that initial model that we created and it's now written it to our database file. Okay, so if we go to here now, you can see that I should have shown you just before I migrated, but the SQL file wouldn't have been modified. Now it has been. Okay, so lastly, before I finish this particular video and move on to the next one, I'm just going to say that we haven't created a super user. So in other words, we haven't created an administrator for our website that we can log in and see things at the back end. All right, so to do that, we're going to say manage. So we're going to say Python manage.py, and we're going to say create super user. Now my super user, I'm going to call him or her admin. I'm going to leave the email address blank. I'm going to make my password admin. Shouldn't do that, it's not safe. And just click on yes, because it warned me about the fact that it's such a simple password. And now if I run the server again, what we're now going to see when we go to our web page is if I go to /admin, I can now log in with my username and password that I've just created, and it takes me to the back end of this software. What I can't see at the moment is I can't see that table that we've created. I've basically got to tell the admin site that these tables exist. Okay, so the way we do that is if I go back to Explorer, if I go to admin, I'm going to have to tell Python that from .models import, and I'm going to say the names of the tables that I want to import. So the first one was, I believe it was film, and the second one I believe was rating. So it's now imported them from the model. So basically the dot means, remember, from this directory. So from this directory here, the films directory, import film and rating from models. So it's gone into the model file and it's imported that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say site dot, actually not, it's going to be admin dot site dot register, and we're going to register film, and we'll do that, and we're also going to register rating. Cool. So now that that's done, you can see it's refreshed that, it's reloaded it. If I go back to here now and I refresh this, you can now see that it's loaded up from the films app, the films table, and the ratings. So if I was to say, let's say we add a film, okay, I need to put down the details such as a title, release date, certificate, but I'm still going to work on this. There's still a few things for us to do. So for example, when we add these in, I'd like this to be a drop down menu so that it can make it easy for me to fill things in, whether it's a PG, a 12A, etc., etc. So we want to put in some kind of validation here. It makes it easy to type some of these things in. And then, the link to the poster of our film as well. And then we can also add ratings. So whenever a film is rated, we refer to the film. Obviously, there's no films in here yet. And we say which user. At the moment, only the admin user exists. And what rating they gave the film, 8 out of 10 or, etc., etc. So anyway, that's done. And if we go back to here, so I know we've created our models as well. And I'll leave this video at that. So this video, we've created our app and we've created our models. We've imported our URL patterns. We're going to create some in the next video, because in the next video, we look at creating functions to run a home page, to load a home page, and to load details of a film. So I'll leave that for the next video.